The soft glow of evening lights filled the little town where Emma lived. She was a simple girl with a heart full of dreams, but her life had never been easy. Every day, she worked in a small bakery owned by an old couple. The warm smell of bread and cakes often comforted her, but inside she carried a silent pain that nobody noticed. People who met her always saw a gentle smile on her face, yet behind that smile was a story untold. She had learned to hide her sadness well, because she believed nobody really wanted to listen. Emma's parents had passed away when she was young, and she grew up in the care of distant relatives who never truly cared for her. She often felt invisible in her own house. The bakery became her safe place, the only corner where she felt alive. The old couple treated her kindly, like the daughter they never had, and sometimes their care gave her strength to move forward. But at night, when she was alone in her small room, the emptiness returned. She dreamed of love, of someone who would hold her hand and make her feel that she belonged somewhere. One evening, when the bakery was about to close, a stranger walked in. His name was Daniel. He looked tired, almost lost, as if he had been carrying a burden for a long time. Emma noticed the sadness in his eyes, and for a brief moment, it felt like she was looking at her own reflection. He ordered a simple coffee, but his voice carried a heaviness that made her curious. She served him with her usual polite smile, yet inside she wondered who this man was and what had brought him here. Daniel was not from the town. He had come from far away, trying to escape the noise of a life that had broken him. He had once been a successful writer, but after losing someone he loved deeply, he had stopped writing. Words, which were once his strength, had become painful reminders of his loss. He came to the small town seeking silence, hoping to find a place where his heart could breathe again. Emma and Daniel exchanged only a few words that night, but something unspoken passed between them. It was not love at first sight, but rather a quiet recognition. Both of them knew the language of loneliness. Daniel left after finishing his coffee, but Emma found herself thinking about him long after he was gone. She wondered if he would ever return, and why his eyes looked so much like her own. The next day, Daniel came again. This time, he stayed a little longer. He asked Emma about the bakery, about the town, and listened as she spoke in her soft voice. For the first time in years, she felt someone was truly listening to her. It was a strange feeling, almost frightening, because she was not used to being seen. Daniel, too, felt a small spark inside him, as if the silence he had been living in was slowly breaking. Days turned into weeks, and their small conversations grew deeper. Emma would wait for Daniel's visits, though she never admitted it. She started noticing the little things about him, how he always carried a notebook but never wrote in it, how his smile was faint but real when he looked at her, and how he seemed to fight with himself whenever she asked about his past. There was a mystery about him, one that both scared and intrigued her. But Emma herself carried secrets too. She never spoke about her parents or the years she spent feeling unwanted. She had built walls around her heart, afraid that if someone knew her pain, they would leave her too. Yet with Daniel, those walls started to tremble. Sometimes, when their eyes met, it felt like both of them were standing on the edge of something powerful, something that could change their lives forever. One rainy evening, the bakery was almost empty. Daniel sat at his usual table, his notebook open but blank. Emma brought him coffee and quietly asked why he never wrote in it. Daniel looked at her for a long time before answering, his voice low and heavy. Because every time I try, the memories come back. And I don't know if I'm ready to face them. His words pierced her heart, because she knew exactly what he meant. She wanted to tell him that running from memories only made the pain deeper, but her own voice failed her. That night, after closing the bakery, Emma walked home in the rain. Her thoughts were restless. She wondered if she was brave enough to let someone into her heart. She wondered if Daniel could ever heal, or if he would remain a shadow of the man he once was. What she didn't realize was that Daniel, sitting in his small rented room, was thinking the same thing. He wondered if Emma was the reason he felt like writing again, if her quiet strength was slowly pulling him out of the darkness. Neither of them knew where this connection would lead, but both of them felt it. Something had begun, something delicate yet powerful. It was as if fate had brought two broken souls together, not to remind them of their pain, but to give them a chance to heal. And in that fragile beginning, hidden in the silence of the town, a story was waiting to unfold. The mornings in the small town were always quiet, but for Emma, the day began with the sweet smell of bread rising in the oven. She worked as usual, greeting customers with a soft smile, yet her mind was not on the bakery. She found herself waiting for the moment when Daniel would walk in. She never admitted it, even to herself, but his presence had started to change something in her heart. She was afraid of this change, yet deep down she longed for it. That afternoon, the bell above the bakery door rang, and Daniel entered as if her thoughts had called him. He looked tired, but his eyes softened the moment they met hers. He ordered his usual coffee, but this time he did not sit in silence. He asked her about her life. Emma froze for a second. Nobody had ever really asked her that before. She gave a small laugh, trying to hide the sadness in her voice, and said her life was ordinary, nothing special. But Daniel looked at her as if he did not believe her. His gaze told her that he could see through the walls she had built. Emma avoided his eyes and quickly changed the topic, asking instead about his notebook. Daniel hesitated. He touched the cover gently, as though it carried both comfort and pain. "I used to write stories," he said quietly, "but then I lost the person who believed in me the most. Since then, I can't bring myself to write another word." His voice cracked as he said it, and Emma felt her heart tighten. She wanted to ask more, but she feared opening wounds that were too deep. Over the next few days, Daniel returned often. Sometimes he would sit for hours, sipping coffee, while Emma worked behind the counter. They spoke in fragments, sharing small pieces of their lives, yet never the whole truth. Emma learned that he once had dreams bigger than the world, but life had broken them. Daniel learned that she was stronger than she appeared, though he sensed there was a hidden sorrow she never mentioned. One evening, Emma found herself standing outside the bakery after closing time. Daniel was waiting there, as if he had something to say but did not know how. The street was quiet, the lamps glowing softly, and the air carried a stillness that made every word feel heavier. "Emma," he began, his voice low, "I don't know why, but when I talk to you, I feel lighter. It's as if the weight I've been carrying for years doesn't feel as heavy anymore." Emma looked at him, her heart racing. No one had ever spoken to her that way. She wanted to reply, but her words got trapped inside. Instead, she simply nodded. Silence stretched between them, but it was not empty. It was filled with something unspoken, something both fragile and powerful. Later that night, Emma sat in her small room, staring at the ceiling. She kept hearing Daniel's words in her mind. She wondered if it was safe to let him in, or if he would leave like everyone else. Memories of her parents and the loneliness she had endured made her chest ache. She wanted to trust him, but fear whispered that opening her heart would only bring more pain. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his rented room with his notebook open. For the first time in years, he held his pen and wrote a few lines. They were not perfect, but they were his. And every word he wrote was inspired by the image of Emma's quiet smile, the way her eyes seemed to understand without judgment. He realized she was the reason his heart was beginning to heal. But with that realization came fear. What if she discovered the depth of his brokenness and turned away? The next day, as Emma served Daniel his coffee, he slid a folded piece of paper across the table. She looked at him with surprise, and he only said, "Read it when you're alone." Emma placed it in her pocket, her curiosity burning, but she waited until nightfall to open it. When she finally unfolded the paper, she found a short poem written in Daniel's uneven handwriting. The words were simple, yet they carried such raw emotion that her eyes filled with tears. It spoke of loss, of searching for light in the darkest places, and of finding hope in the gentlest smile. Emma realized the poem was about her. Her heart trembled as she read it again and again. For the first time, she felt seen, not just her smile, not just her kindness, but the quiet pain she carried inside. Daniel had captured her without even knowing her full story. And in that moment, she felt something shift deep within her. But as she closed her eyes, a troubling thought crept into her mind. People always left. People always broke promises. Could Daniel truly stay, or was this only a fragile dream that would shatter too soon? Emma did not know the answer, but she knew one thing for certain: her life was no longer the same. A storm was coming, not one of rain or thunder, but of emotions too strong to ignore. And in that storm, both Emma and Daniel would be tested in ways neither of them expected. The bakery was busier than usual that morning, but Emma's thoughts were far away. She kept glancing at the folded poem she had hidden in her apron pocket. Every time she touched the paper, her heart beat faster. It was the first time someone had expressed such deep feelings about her, and it scared her as much as it comforted her. She wondered if Daniel knew how much his words had touched her, or if he had simply written them without realizing their effect. Daniel entered the bakery later than usual. His steps were slower, as if he had been walking with a heavy mind. When his eyes met Emma's, he gave a faint smile, the kind that showed gratitude more than joy. She wanted to thank him for the poem, but the bakery was full, and words refused to come out. Instead, she handed him his coffee with a quiet look, one that spoke louder than words. Daniel seemed to understand, and that silent exchange carried more weight than any conversation. That evening, after closing the bakery, Emma found Daniel waiting outside again. This time, the air between them was charged with questions neither had dared to ask. They walked side by side through the empty streets. The town was quiet, with only the sound of their footsteps filling the space. Daniel finally broke the silence. "Did you read it?" he asked softly. Emma nodded. For a moment she hesitated, then whispered, "It was beautiful. But why did you write it for me?" Daniel stopped walking. His eyes searched hers, as though he was trying to decide if she was ready for the truth. "Because when I see you, Emma, I see hope. I've been lost for so long, but you remind me that maybe life still has something left to give." His words carried pain, but also a tenderness that made Emma's heart tremble. Emma wanted to tell him about her own struggles, about the loneliness that had shadowed her life. But the fear of rejection tightened her throat. Instead, she looked away and said, "Sometimes hope is just an illusion. It disappears when you need it most." Her voice shook, betraying the emotions she had tried so hard to hide. Daniel gently touched her arm, not in a forceful way, but with quiet reassurance. "Or sometimes hope is found where you least expect it," he replied. His words lingered in her mind long after they parted ways that night. Back in her small room, Emma stared at the ceiling once again, torn between fear and longing. She felt drawn to Daniel, yet the thought of opening her heart terrified her. She remembered how people had overlooked her pain before, how they had walked away when she needed them. What if Daniel did the same? What if trusting him only led to another heartbreak? Still, deep inside, a small voice whispered that maybe this time was different. Meanwhile, Daniel sat at his desk, struggling with his pen. He had written another page, but this time it wasn't just about Emma, it was about himself. For the first time in years, he was confronting his grief on paper. He wrote about the woman he had lost, about the nights of silence that had drowned him, and about the unexpected light that Emma had brought into his world. Writing these words made him tremble, but it also made him feel alive again. The following day, Daniel surprised Emma by inviting her for a walk outside the town. She hesitated, unsure if she should step into something that felt dangerous for her heart. But his quiet sincerity convinced her. They walked along a path near the river, where the water shimmered under the late afternoon sun. For the first time, Emma laughed freely as Daniel shared a memory from his past that was light-hearted and warm. The sound of her laughter startled even herself. It had been so long since she had felt that kind of joy. But as they sat by the riverbank, Daniel grew quiet. His expression shifted, as though shadows had returned to his heart. Emma noticed and asked gently, "What is it?" Daniel looked at the water, his voice heavy. "There's something you don't know about me, Emma. Something that might change the way you see me." He paused, fighting with himself. "The person I lost, she wasn't just someone I loved. She was my fiancée. And I blame myself for her death. That's why I can't write anymore. That's why I came here, to run away from the man I've become." Emma's breath caught in her throat. The weight of his confession struck her deeply. She wanted to comfort him, but his pain was so raw, so heavy, that her words felt too small. Tears filled her eyes, not just for him, but for herself, because she too carried a story she had never shared. The silence between them grew thick, filled with truths that were too painful to release all at once. Emma finally whispered, "Daniel, you're not alone. We all carry scars. Some are just hidden deeper than others." Her voice trembled, but in that moment, something fragile but real passed between them. As they walked back to town, both Emma and Daniel knew their connection had deepened. But with it came new fears. The closer they grew, the more dangerous it felt to their hearts. Trusting someone meant giving them the power to hurt you, and neither of them was sure if they were strong enough for that. Yet fate had already tied their stories together, and neither could step away now. And as the night fell over the quiet town, both of them wondered if love was truly possible for two broken souls, or if their pasts would destroy the fragile bond they had just begun to build. The days began to change for both Emma and Daniel. What once felt like empty routines now carried quiet anticipation. Emma found herself waking earlier, fixing her hair a little more carefully before leaving for the bakery. Daniel, too, felt his mornings lighter, as if the weight of his past was shifting little by little. Their conversations grew longer, and their silences became more meaningful. Still, beneath every smile, both carried unspoken fears. One late afternoon, Emma finished her work earlier than usual. The bakery was quiet, the smell of fresh bread lingering in the air. She stepped outside and found Daniel waiting across the street. He waved softly, and without words, they began walking together. Their steps led them toward the old park on the edge of town. The park was nearly empty, with only the sound of rustling leaves around them. Daniel sat on a bench, and Emma joined him, her heart unsure but willing. After a long pause, Daniel opened his notebook. For the first time, he showed her the pages he had been writing. Emma hesitated before taking it into her hands. As she read the words, her chest grew heavy. The writing was filled with grief, guilt, and longing, but also glimpses of hope, hope that seemed to shine through because of her. She looked at him, her eyes wet, and whispered, "Daniel, this is beautiful." He shook his head. "It's broken, just like me." Emma gently closed the notebook and placed it on his lap. "Broken things can still be beautiful," she said quietly. Her voice trembled, because she knew she was also speaking about herself. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Daniel reached out and took her hand. His touch was soft, almost uncertain, but it carried a warmth that made Emma's heart race. She had not been held like this in years. Tears slipped from her eyes, and before she could stop herself, she whispered, "I've been so alone, Daniel. For so long." Daniel's eyes softened with pain. "Me too," he admitted. "And maybe that's why we found each other." That night, Emma could not sleep. She kept replaying that moment on the bench, the feel of his hand holding hers, the sincerity in his voice. For years, she had told herself that she was unworthy of love, that people always left. But Daniel was still here, despite his own brokenness. The thought terrified her as much as it gave her hope. But shadows from the past never stay buried for long. The next day, Emma received an unexpected letter from her relatives, the same ones who had never cared for her when she was young. They had suddenly decided to reach out, asking her to return to them, claiming they wanted to make things right. The words on the page made Emma's stomach twist. She had no desire to return to a place that had caused her so much pain, yet part of her wondered if she should face it. When Daniel came to the bakery that evening, Emma seemed distracted. He noticed immediately. "What happened?" he asked. She hesitated but eventually showed him the letter. His jaw tightened as he read it. "Do you want to go back?" he asked carefully. Emma shook her head. "That house was never home. But I don't know what they want from me now. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to face them." Daniel placed the letter down, his eyes serious. "You are stronger than you think, Emma. You've survived things most people couldn't. Don't let them decide your worth." Her eyes filled with tears, and before she could stop herself, she whispered, "But what if you leave too? Everyone does." The words hung heavy in the air. Daniel was silent for a long time, struggling with his own fears. Finally, he said, "Emma, I can't promise the future. But I can promise this, I don't want to run anymore. Not from my past, and not from you." Those words touched Emma deeply, but they also frightened her. Trusting someone was like standing on the edge of a cliff. One wrong step, and everything could shatter. Still, as she looked at him, she realized she wanted to believe him. Later that night, Daniel sat in his room, staring at his notebook. He thought of Emma's tears, her fears, her strength. He began writing again, not about his loss this time, but about a girl who had survived her own storms, who carried pain but still found the courage to smile. Every word was about Emma. For the first time in years, he felt his writing come alive with purpose. But deep in his heart, Daniel knew that healing would not be easy. His grief was not gone, and Emma's scars were still fresh. The path ahead would test them both in ways they could not imagine. Still, under the quiet night sky, two broken souls had taken a step closer to each other. And in that fragile closeness, a seed of love was beginning to grow, one that could either bloom into something lasting or be crushed by the weight of their pasts. The morning sun filled the little town with a soft golden glow, yet Emma felt restless inside. The letter from her relatives weighed heavily on her mind. She had folded it and tucked it away, but the words still echoed in her heart. They wanted her to return, to step back into a past that had only given her pain. She feared that if she ignored it, the shadows of her old life would follow her forever. At the bakery, Daniel arrived earlier than usual. He looked at Emma carefully, noticing the tiredness in her eyes. Without a word, he picked up a tray of bread to help her. She gave him a small smile, touched by his quiet support. For the first time in her life, she felt she was not facing the world alone. Still, her heart was unsettled. That evening, Daniel invited Emma to the park again. The benches were cool from the evening breeze, and the sky was painted with shades of orange and purple. Emma sat quietly, holding the letter in her hands. Finally, she said, "I don't want to go back. But part of me feels like if I don't face them, I'll never be free." Daniel listened carefully, his eyes steady on hers. "Then face them," he said softly, "but on your terms. Not because they call you, not because they suddenly pretend to care. Do it for yourself, Emma. And know that I'll be there with you." His words gave her courage. For so long, she had carried her pain in silence, but now she felt stronger with Daniel by her side. She nodded, and a quiet determination settled in her heart. The following week, Emma decided to meet her relatives. Daniel insisted on coming with her, but she told him she needed to do this part alone. Standing at the door of the house she once called home, memories came flooding back: loneliness, neglect, cold nights when nobody asked if she was all right. Her hands trembled as she knocked on the door. When her relatives opened it, they greeted her with smiles that felt false. They spoke of regret, of wanting to repair the bond, but Emma saw through their words. They had not changed. They only wanted her back for reasons of their own, perhaps money, perhaps guilt, but not love. Emma listened quietly, her heart no longer desperate for their approval. For the first time, she realized she did not need them to feel whole. With calm strength, she said, "I forgive you, but I won't come back. I've found my own life now, and it's not here." Her voice did not shake. She turned and walked away, leaving behind the ghosts of her past. When she returned to the town, Daniel was waiting at the bakery steps. His eyes searched hers, and she gave him a small nod. He smiled, relief flooding his face. "You did it," he whispered. Emma felt tears rise, but this time they were not from sadness. They were from freedom. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, both Emma and Daniel began to heal in ways they had never thought possible. Daniel's notebook filled with new words, not just of pain, but of hope, laughter, and love. Emma, too, found herself opening her heart more each day. She no longer felt like a girl defined by her past. She was becoming a woman who had survived and grown stronger. One evening, as the town lights flickered on, Daniel handed Emma his notebook again. She opened it and found a story, not about loss, but about two broken souls who found each other in the most unexpected place. At the end of the story, a single line made her heart stop: "Every day I choose hope, because I choose you." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she looked at him. Daniel took her hands in his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Emma, I don't know what the future holds. But I know this: you're my reason to keep living, to keep writing, to keep believing. I love you." Emma's voice trembled as she whispered back, "I love you too." In that quiet moment, surrounded by the soft hum of the town, two broken hearts finally found a home in each other. Their scars had not disappeared, but together they had learned that love was not about being unbroken, it was about healing side by side. And so, in the little town with its warm bakery and gentle evenings, Emma and Daniel began a new chapter, one not written by pain, but by the strength of love that had grown between them.